Alright, sorry guys, I'm back. I had to go change my shirt. I was getting a little too warm in it. Plus, it's no fun to be in your dress clothes all day. I've been in them since about 7 o'clock this morning, and it's now about 10 till 11, so I was tired of wearing them. Let's get back to history, though. Yay, history! So we were talking about Gerard. Now, Gerard is in favor of something called the Kentucky Resolutions, and these are something that are that's heavily debated in the Kentucky Constitutional Conventions. I'm eventually going to get these words out today. Um, and with these, they discuss mainly the Alien and Sedition Acts under Adams, the U.S. President Adams. And they're written by Jefferson and Madison. And they're calling for states' rights to declare things unconstitutional, including the Alien and Sedition Acts, and a strict reading of the U.S. Constitution. So, what President Adams has called for in the Alien and Sedition Acts is that there's no naturalization, no imprisonment or deportation of citizens who are deemed to be dangerous from a hostile nation, which at this point is the British, and no false statements to the U.S. government. Which, normally these things come into question only for those who are people immigrating to the United States. So, we're talking like first generation U.S. citizens saying that people who are freshly immigrating to the United States cannot become United States citizens, which kind of sounds a little funny, but that's what they're calling for here. And it's because they're having so many issues with the British at this point. But Gerard himself is calling for and supports public education, militia and prison reform, debtor class legislation, things to kind of make things easier on the debtor classes. Generally up until this point, if you owed a debt, you went to jail, and then if your family didn't pay your debt, then your family would go to jail, and everybody would be in jail, and you'd just die in jail, or somebody would have to bail you out from jail and pay your debt. But Gerard is supporting things to change that a little bit. Business subsidies, and he supports Louisiana Purchase, which is approximately 828,000 square miles for 50 million $50 million francs, which ends up being in U.S. dollars about 11,250,000 U.S. dollars. And this would cancel all of the French debt that they have toward America, and Napoleon is selling this off to pay for his movements in Europe at this time. So Gerard supports this wholeheartedly, and this is a fairly contentious piece of legislation in and of itself, but Gerard supports it. So moving on from there, you've got the Burr conspiracy. Now this weird-looking feller on the next slide, this is Mr. Burr, and he is the third vice president of the United States under Jefferson, and he ends up being killed in a duel with Alexander Hamilton, future U.S. president. He's not very well liked, but in this plot that Mr. Burr, Aaron Burr, comes up with, he and a man named James Wilkinson attempt to separate parts of the Louisiana Purchase and Territory and Mexican territory from the United States. So Burr begins negotiations with Great Britain and Spain, and he's given money by both to support his agenda in separating parts of this territory for himself. Um, and this has the possibility of inciting war with Spain. Great Britain is giving them more money than Spain is, but Spain's still giving him money. And he's arrested in Kentucky. Um, and Joseph Hamilton Davies, who is one of his Confederates, is arrested in Kentucky. Excuse me, and there's a letter sent to Jefferson, and initially Jefferson didn't believe that there was any kind of conspiracy going on, but Aaron Burr is represented by Henry Clay, and Burr claims that he wants to settle in Texas rather than owning, parts of Texas territory for himself, so it can be a separate nation. He just says, "Oh no, I just want to settle here. That's all I want. Nothing more." And initially he had been charged with treason, but he's acquitted for treason, which means that he ends up not being charged for treason. But it ends up being the death of his political career. He's no longer involved in politics. And he's given a high misdemeanor and is charged with conspiracy, but the high misdemeanor ends up being revoked. So then we end up with Shelby again. And in Shelby's second term between 1812 and 1816, he's called Old Daddy because he's 62. And he's going up against a man named Gabriel Slaughter. Now, at the Battle of Kings Mountain in South Carolina, Slaughter is a part of this, and he was part of the militia during the Revolutionary War. And he says it's reported that Colonel Shelby run at Kings Mountain. So he's saying that Shelby is a coward and that he ran away from trouble at Kings Mountain, so he has no right to get to become governor. And this is a rhetorical tactic where it's kind of saying, oh, look at this guy. He's not trustworthy because he ran during this battle, and he's no good as a candidate because of that. And so, his supporters come back and say, true he did. Shelby's supporters say, true he did. First he run up to the enemy. Then after an action of about 47 minutes, he ran again with 900 prisoners. And that's what his supporters say. So his supporters come back and, they make a really good rebuttal to Gabriel Slaughter. And Shelby ends up winning the war because of this. But there's a whole lot of war preparation that's going on with this. Because, the War of 1812, it's coming. His second term starts with the War of 1812. And so with Governor Charles Scott from another province, he made William Henry Harrison the commander 2 days prior to going into office, and he influences Harrison's bid for commander of military forces in the Northwest Territory. So he's a big supporter of William Henry Harrison's actions within the Northwest Territory, and he's another one of those people who are not particularly nice to Native Americans, and he continually sends forces to Harrison and support him during the War of 1812. So moving into the War of 1812, I want to give you guys just a little bit of context before we go on with this. And actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold off the War of 1812 until next week. So we'll get into the War of 1812 next week, and we'll kind of go from here for next week. Hopefully we can catch up in the next 2 weeks so that we're not running behind for your test. But make sure you guys get your primary source document analyses in. We'll start with the War of 1812 and we'll move on from there for the week after. So this video may come in parts 1 and 2. So keep your eye out for the first part, because this is obviously going to be the second part. And we'll discuss this next week, and we'll give a little bit of a refresher for next week. So have a good day and good luck, guys. Have a good week.